Well, class, this week we're going to talk about learning preferences. And this is just part one. Today we're going to talk about the MBTI, Myers-Briggs type indicator. Perhaps you've heard of it before. For learning preferences, here are the basics. We're talking about learning styles. So how you like to acquire and work with information, this is your learning preference. Some people are more auditory, meaning they like to hear the information, whereas others are more visual. They like to see the information, whereas others perhaps are more kinesthetic, or they're more hands-on. They like to be doing in order to learn. So we'll get into that in another video. Your learning preference varies from person to person. So everyone's different. We all learn in different ways. And we're not exclusively one way or another. We can all learn in every different way. It's just that we gravitate toward a certain learning style. And so we'll talk more about that. And you can develop the other techniques with effort and practice. So although, for example, you might be a visual type person, you can also develop your auditory skills or your kinesthetic skills depending on the circumstances. So first let's talk about the MBTI. It's based on the work of psychologist Carl Jung, and you're going to be taking a test which will determine what your MBTI preference is. And you'll be getting a 4-letter code. There are 16 different personality styles, and so your 4-letter code will have a combination of letters. So your first letter will be either an E or an I. E is for extrovert, I is for introvert. This has to do with where we focus our energy. It has to do with how we derive energy. You know, many people think that an extrovert is someone who's outgoing and always wants to be with people, whereas introverts don't like people, they don't want to be with people, and they're quiet. But the fact is, introverts, like myself, I am a total I. I love being with people. I'm a very social person. So what does it mean to be an introvert or an extrovert? Again, it has to do with how we derive energy or where we focus our energy. So, for example, me, I'm an introvert, so when I need to recharge, I need my alone time. I need to be by myself to read a book or just spend time on YouTube, or I just need to be by myself to recharge. Where those who are extroverts need to be with people to recharge, perhaps be with their friends or be at a party. That's how they recharge. So your first letter is going to be either an E or an I. And perhaps even before you take the online assessment that I'm going to link to in the description below the video, perhaps you can guess ahead of time what your letter might be and see if your guess matches what the assessment comes out with later. Your second letter will be either an S or an I. This has to do with the kinds of information that we prefer to work with. We'll talk more about this in the next few slides. Your third letter will be either a T or an F. T is for thinking, F is for feeling. This is how we make decisions. Your fourth letter will be a J or a P. J is for judging, P is for perceiving. This is how we organize our time and activities. And again, we'll talk about that more in a little bit. So I've already talked about the extroverts and introverts a little bit. Extroverts are action-oriented. They like spending time with others. They often learn best by interacting and discussing. Whereas introverts, they're more thought-oriented. They're energized by spending time alone. They prefer to learn through reflection. As I mentioned, your second letter is going to be either an S or an N. S is for sensing, N is for intuition. This is how you take in information. So sensors prefer working with information through their senses. Basically, your main senses are touch, hearing, seeing, tasting, and smelling. So you take in information through your senses. You have to touch it. Uh, they love details and facts and have an easy time remembering. They choose to focus on what is rather than on what might be, and they enjoy making connections. Now, intuitive learners, they prefer to understand the big picture. It's almost as if they have a sixth sense, beyond the five senses where they have to see, touch, taste, smell, or hear. They just intuitively, I hate to use the word in the sentence, but they just kind of intuitively know things. They're future oriented. They can picture things. They focus on the possibilities rather than on just the facts. They like to get an overview of the topic before specifics. And they use the big picture to organize details and facts. So write down what you think your second letter is. Do you think you're an S for sensing, or do you think you're an N for intuitive? Your next letter is going to be either a T or an F. T is for thinking, F is for feeling. This is how you make decisions. So people who are thinkers, they prefer to use analysis and logic to arrive at a decision. Whereas feeling decision makers, they tend to make choices that maintain harmony or that demonstrate concern about human values and needs. For example, let's say you're a coach of an all-girl soccer team. You have 15 players, but you can only take, let's say you can only take 12 players to a special match. Well, who would you take? Well, if you're a thinker, then you would probably pick players who, in their stats, are the best players. They make the most points. They're just the best players. Whereas a feeling decision maker might decide on, well, these few girls, they didn't get to go last year. Well, I would like for them to go this year. They'll make decisions based on their values rather than on cold statistics and analysis. So write down what letter, your third letter, write down whether you think you're a thinking decision maker or a feeling decision maker. Your fourth letter is going to be either a J or a P. J stands for judging, P stands for perceiving. Now, I don't want you to misunderstand judging. This doesn't mean you're judgmental. Judging simply means that you're more organized. You like things to be orderly. As the chart says, you plan the details of your actions before proceeding. You focus on actions that directly contribute to achievement of a goal or task. And you have structured routines. Whereas perceiving learners are more comfortable taking action without first developing a plan. They like to multitask and juggle different projects at once. They prefer keeping their options open rather than committing to a decision. And I might illustrate it this way. Let's say you were going on a cruise and you're with a friend. Let's just say one of you is a judging type person, the other is a perceiving type person. Well, the judging type person will want all the details of the trip planned out in advance. They know what excursions they're going to go on ahead of time. They want to know what time they're going to be eating. Everything is planned out in advance. Whereas the perceiver would want to leave things open. We'll just go with the flow, and whatever happens, happens, and we'll decide as we go along. And they don't typically want a set times to do things. So that's the difference between the two. So write down what you think your fourth letter is. Are you a judging type person, very orderly type, or are you a perceiver type person where you like things to be open? And here's a chart that demonstrates the extreme opposites. Now, so okay, just so you know, everyone in the class has a little bit of both. You have a little bit of extroversion, a little bit of introversion, a little bit of sensing, a little intuition, a little bit of thinking, a little bit of feeling, a little bit of judging, a little bit of perceiving. But what we're looking for here are, where do you go to first? What is your preference, your natural preference? What is your go-to? So if you look at the scale here, uh, extroverts spend time with people, learn through discussion, share ideas in the moment. Whereas introverts prefer time alone, they learn through reflection, they think about ideas before sharing. So where do you fall on that continuum? Do you have a strong preference for extrovert, a moderate preference? Are you neutral? Do you have a moderate preference for introvert or a strong preference for introvert? Then the second one, of course, we said your letter was going to be either an S or an N, N for intuitive. They didn't use I for intuitive, obviously, because I was used for introvert. So they're using the second letter N. So do you focus on details? Do you prefer facts? Do you focus on what is? Or do you focus on the big picture, prefer concepts, focus on what might be? And so you would fall somewhere on that continuum. The third one, thinking or feeling. If you're a thinking type person, you consider facts when making decisions. You make decisions based on logic. You decide with your head. Whereas if you're a feeling type person, you consider people when making decisions. You make decisions based on values and you decide with your heart. And then finally, again, you're either judging or perceiving. Judging type persons like to come to decisions. They like structure. They like to plan. Whereas those who are perceivers, they avoid decisions and favor exploring options. They go with the flow. They're comfortable without a plan. So that's an overview of MBTI. At this point, I'd like you to click on the link for the MBTI assessment, and we'll see if the assessment shows the same letters that you came up with as we went through this presentation.